Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, because we are meeting from all over the world. My name is Louise Bauer, and I'm president of the World Obesity Federation. I'm speaking to you from Sydney in Australia, and I'm on the lands of the Darug people, which is in part of northwestern Sydney. Today, we come to look at the issue of changing perspectives and advancing national action on the issue of obesity. We will hear pre-recorded talks. We will launch the 2023 World Obesity Atlas, and we will hear directly from people with lived experience and policy experts from many parts of the world. Why are we doing this? Well, the issue of obesity remains more important even than before. Between 2020 and 2035, the number of people living with obesity is predicted to double, when those numbers should have returned to the original 2010 WHO target of no increase. So we're very much off target. Not meeting these obesity targets also puts other WHO and UN targets in jeopardy, including those related to the NCDs, some of the Sustainable Development Goals, and 3 billion. Now, of course, obesity is a risk factor, but sometimes it's misconstrued as only a risk factor for other diseases. Yet obesity is recognised as a disease, for example, in the International Classifications of Diseases 11th revision. And as of 2022, there is a new framework for action with WHO recommendations and acceleration plan. It's a very exciting time. At the same time, as you'll hear later, the economic impact of overweight and obesity, if no further changes occur, is estimated to rise from 2.4% of GDP in 2020 to 2.9% by 2035 as an average across 161 countries, with the biggest increase concentrated in lower resourced countries. So this brings us to World Obesity Day 2023, 4th of March. Our theme for World Obesity Day this year is changing perspectives. Let's talk about obesity. As I've just commented, obesity is on the rise globally, and efforts to address it are challenging due to, in part, misconceptions about obesity and the role it plays in a person's health. So that's why we want to change perspectives and why we want to talk about it. We in particular want to talk about bold policies, particularly at a national level, and that's a major focus of today's webinar. So it's wonderful to have these various people here with us. World Obesity Day has been going for several years, and every year we see more participants, higher engagement, further successes, stronger impact, and greater awareness. Now, the mission of World Obesity Day is to increase the awareness of obesity as a disease, to encourage advocacy, changing the way obesity is addressed across society, improving policies, and sharing experiences. And that's what we're doing together this morning, evening, and day. We really are building momentum for action on obesity. We want to change perspectives and build understanding. We want to build coalitions with neighbouring organisations. We want to advocate for change and build a case for strong national action. And we need to talk about it in order to do so. So that's why we're here, World Obesity Day 2023, and why this particular meeting is on changing perspectives and advancing national action. I therefore want to introduce our very first speaker, who has a pre-recorded video from none other than the Director General of WHO, Dr. Tedros. Thank you.
On current trends, by 2035, the majority of the world's population will be overweight or obese. Obesity affects lives and livelihoods, contributing to an estimated 4 million deaths every year. Obesity-related diseases drain scarce resources from health systems and negatively impact economies. No country is immune to the obesity epidemic, which presents a double burden for middle and low-income countries that are already struggling with undernutrition. WHO's Stop Obesity Plan is designed to catalyze global action on obesity in the most affected countries. The plan focuses on evidence-based, cost-effective interventions which can be adapted to fit country needs. These include policies to change food systems, improve the built environment, and integrate obesity management into health systems. So far, 28 countries are committed to implementing the plan. With strong political commitment and accountable implementation, we can bend the obesity curve and make 2035 a healthier and more sustainable year for all.
Well, that was a great start. Yes, let's bend that obesity curve. We will now listen to the second of the pre-recorded videos, and today we will hear from the Egyptian Minister for Health, His Excellency, Professor Khaled Abdel Ghaffar, he's addressing Egypt's progress on the implementation of the WHO Acceleration Plan as one of the front-runner countries. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Professor Louise Burr, President, World Obesity Federation, Excellencies, dear colleagues, country representatives, distinguished guests, obesity is a complex disease that impacts millions of individuals worldwide, and its prevalence continues to rise, making it one of the most significant public health challenges of our time. Unfortunately, Egypt is no exception, with obesity rates increased steadily over the years, especially among children, adolescents, and Egypt has taken a comprehensive approach to this important health problem by putting in place a number of policies, programs, and initiatives to encourage healthy living and stop obesity. We have also learned and teamed up with international organizations to share information, best practice, and plans for fighting this disease. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the most important steps we have taken is the launch of a national strategy for food and nutrition 2023-2030 to improve food security and nutritional status and reduce malnutrition problems along the life course and for vulnerable groups, and help achieve the Sustainable Development Goals relating to nutrition, food security, and climate change, as well as the national goals related to social development, economic growth, and eliminating poverty. Another initiative that we have implemented since the last 5 years is the fixed program to screen the anemia, obesity, and stunting among primary school children as a national program to address the triple burden of malnutrition affecting our children. Egypt has made community-based programs to encourage physical activity and healthy lifestyles, such as balanced diet, regular physical activity as part of its effort to fight obesity. This campaign has been designed to target all age groups, especially children and young adults who are at high risk of developing obesity. There are public awareness campaigns, health education programs in schools, and in partnership with the food industry to offer healthier food options as part of the campaign. Our goal is to make a place where healthy living is easier, and we think that education and awareness are two of the most important ways to do this. Honorable attendees, in addition to these initiatives, we have also made significant investment in the research field to better understand the cause and consequences of obesity. This research has provided us with valuable insights into the factors that contribute to obesity, such as genetics, environment, and lifestyle. We have also put in place a number of policies to encourage people to choose healthier food. This includes rules about food labeling, advertising, and marketing. We have also encouraged food manufacturers to reduce the amount of sugar, salt, and fat in their products and increase the availability of healthy food options. We believe that these policies will help to create a healthier food environment and make it easier for people to make healthier choices. We also recognize that the food industry has an important role to play in the fight against obesity, and we encourage them to continue working with us to promote healthier eating habits. Esteemed representatives, as we mark World Obesity Day, let us reflect on the importance of addressing obesity and the impact it has on our health, society, and economy. Let us also remember that obesity is almost preventable, and we have a role to play in promoting healthy living and preventing obesity. In conclusion, I want to emphasize that obesity is a significant health issue that requires a comprehensive and collaborative approach to tackle. As the Egyptian Ministry of Health, I pledge to continue working with our partners and friends and stakeholders to create an environment that supports healthy living and prevents obesity. I also call on all of you to join us in this critical fight against obesity, and together let us build a healthier and more prosperous future for all of us. And I thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much to the minister. And it is now our great pleasure to introduce Professor Tim Longstein, who is the Senior Advisor and former Director of Policy for the World Obesity Federation and the author of the World Obesity Atlas. And I know that we will also be, Professor Louise Bauer will be leaving shortly, as it's, I think, well in the middle of the night in Australia. So thank you very much, Louise. Thank you.
Right, over to me. Thank you, Johanna, for that kind introduction. I was only part of the team that built the Atlas. It would be unwise of me to claim authorship, particularly as I made certain errors in it that had to be rectified. So, but it's beautiful now. Let me just see if I can share my screen with you and introduce the Atlas to you. Half a mo. Just find the right buttons. Share screen. Share the presentation, share, and blow it up. Okay, are you seeing my full screen slide? Or is it still partial?
In your PowerPoint slide, so you need to, yeah.
Okay. Oh, I'm on thank you. Well, that's no good, is it? Start at the beginning. This goes to show. Good. Okay, here we go. Well, thank you anyway for the invitation to show the Atlas today. In fact, it was launched a couple of days ago on the 4th, technically, but it's a repeating and very rich source of material. But repeating, I say, because it starts 5 years ago. But let me give a little bit of background, which is that before we launched the 2023, we launched four previous ones, is it? And they're all based on the World Obesity Federation's Global Obesity Observatory. This is our ongoing database. It's a fantastic resource. The Atlas simply draws on it and other sources once a year to provide a summary of what's going on. But this resource is brilliant. You can hover over a country, up will pop some statistics. You can move from that to more depth, penetrate down into more details about the policies and the statistics for obesity in each country. So, very important that if you want the facts and figures, go to the Obesity Observatory. Okay, well, the first Atlas was 2019, focused on childhood obesity and the trends and predictions for that. And it achieved front page news, as I recall. Even then, we were quite surprised at how well it managed to get publicity. The second, in 2020, looked at the progress for adult obesity through to 2025, which was the WHO target year for achieving no increase in obesity from 2010 levels. And unfortunately, we were predicting that this was unlikely to happen. The 2021 Atlas looked at what had then become a very important issue, which was the COVID-19 epidemic across the world, showing, of course, that what we now know very well, that the early data showed that people living with overweight and obesity were more at risk of hospitalization if they caught COVID, and more at risk of further complications. So having obesity was an added risk within the COVID-19 epidemic. And in a sense, if you want a healthy population that can resist COVID, you need to have a healthy weight population. That was the message of 2021. 2022, we focused on universal health coverage and the preparedness of countries to deal with obesity and associated NCDs. And in fact, we continued that theme this year. So this year's Atlas, which I'm very happy to officially launch today, talked about a number of things. I'll move on to the next slide for that. Here we go. My panel of people is in the way here. Let's see if I can move it. There we go. So the current Atlas, the headline figures in the current Atlas, the prevalence forecast for Atlas for adults and children up to 2035 predict that a quarter of the global population will be classified as obese by that year, including a fifth of children. And as Dr. Tedros said, over a half of all adults will be predicted to be overweight or obese by that year. And that lower income countries will see the fastest rise, but they are, of course, least prepared, and we'll come back to that in a moment. The economic impact of a high BMI, overweight or obese, on national and global GDP was estimated to rise from currently around 2 trillion to 4.3 trillion by 2035. That's the annual costs. That's approximately 3% of global annual GDP, almost equivalent to the amount of damage that COVID has been doing. The annual impact for low and middle income countries itself was estimated at 370 billion, about 2% of their GDP. And these are countries that desperately need to improve their GDP and come out of their low income status. Okay, the Atlas is in fact full of huge numbers of tables and figures and graphs that I hope you will spend some time looking at. I'm not going to repeat them here and now, but they include, for example, this graphic here showing that a rising proportion of girls with obesity are living in middle income countries, lower and middle income countries, achieving more than 50% of girls with obesity in those countries. So these issues are quite significant. I'm not going to dwell on them now. I want to add to the fact that we have in this Atlas, as we have in every single Atlas to date, the national country cards, country scorecards, showing the data for rising trends in obesity for men and women and girls and boys, the economic impact, including healthcare, absenteeism, and premature death. That's what we base the GDP figures on. And the ranking for preparedness to cope with the obesity epidemic. For each of these countries, we have this data. So they provide really helpful advocacy information if you're working in one of these countries and want to raise the issue with your ministry or with the finance ministry, perhaps, because costs are really the focus of this Atlas this year. Okay, one last thing is to come back to this issue about the preparedness. This is a scoring method we developed last year and we've done again this year. On national health coverage, are countries prepared to cope with obesity and with the related NCDs that arise? And we use universal health coverage scores and combine those with prevention strategies to come up with a ranking for each of the countries that we could have data for. That's about 180 countries. So all countries are ranked from the best prepared, 1, to the least prepared, 183. And you'll see from the table on the left that most lower income countries fall below average. That's to say, they will be hit the hardest by the rising prevalence, and they will be the ones that need support. And so it's very important, I think, that we work hard on this WHO acceleration plan, because that's really our best chance of trying to tackle this epidemic. So thank you for the opportunity of telling you a little about the Atlas. The website is given here if you want to go straight to the Atlas, and I thank you for your attention today.
Thank you, Tim, for that excellent presentation. And it's now, again, I would ask people, if you have questions, there's going to be opportunities for Q&A a little bit later, but please post them in the Q&A box. We have one more speaker, and then we will go into a panel with an extraordinarily diverse and highly ranked and estimable and experienced group of experts from all over the world. And by experts, I range from lived experience to public health to clinical. And we will have an opportunity to hear sort of the translation of these challenges and opportunities on the ground. But first, it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Francesco Branca, who is director of the Nutrition and Food Safety Department at the World Health Organization headquarters in Geneva. And he has been a leader and an ally in and a really important catalyst in the global obesity agenda and the new acceleration plan. So, Dr. Branca, thank you.
Thank you, Joanna, for the introduction. Good morning to all. As Professor Bauer was indicating in an introduction, the World Health Organization has been asked by the World Health Assembly to really take stock of this 20 years of research and public health policy to address the challenge of obesity. So in 2021, we developed a document really summarizing all the WHO recommendation to address obesity. And that's an important and complex package. It was also the time when we really had a set of targets basically across the life course, target for children, target for adolescents, target for adults, with the objective of really curbing obesity rate and possibly bending the curve by the year 2025. But as Professor Lobsen was saying, this was not going to be achieved. We realized that already in 2021. But we do have a recommendation for the diagnosis, prevention, and management of obesity. Building also on the report on ending childhood obesity that was developed a few years ago that was really indicating a set of important priorities for action. But in the last 20 years, basically, we've been able to see that the scale of pandemic has expanded. No country is really exempt. And so the World Health Assembly basically realized that although the knowledge about the severity of the epidemic and its public health and economic impact was there, no action had been taken, no radical action had been taken anywhere, basically, to stop it. We're starting to see some countries with promising actions, but unfortunately, the fact of the matter is that we have not been able to stop the epidemic anywhere in the world. So that's why the World Health Assembly requested WHO to take an action and indicate what should be the way forward. And that's why the WHO produced an acceleration plan. So acceleration plan basically recognized the complexities of the causes of obesity, but it also says we need to start from somewhere. We need to prioritize and focus on a subset of cost-effective policies on prevention and management. So this acceleration plan, which was endorsed by the WHO, first and foremost says we need to act across settings, but we need to scale up a set of effective intervention on food system, and that's shifting food environment, a set of 4 or 5 policies on marketing, labeling, public food procurement, reformulation, and I was very happy to see that the Egyptian plan is taking them on board. Working, of course, on the physical activity, particularly looking at the school setting and looking at active transport, and then including a component of the management of obesity. So basically changes in the health system, making sure that the management of obesity is an integral part of the primary health care benefit package. So acceleration plan indicates somehow a package of priority intervention. It then indicates the development of a roadmap. So it asks countries to come forward to become what we call front runners. And we do have at the moment 28 front runner countries in different regions of the world: Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Mexico, Panama, Peru, Trinidad and Tobago, and Uruguay in the American region, Bahrain, Egypt, Iran, Jordan, Kuwait, and Tunisia in the Eastern Mediterranean, Botswana, Eswatini, Mauritius, Seychelles, and South Africa in the African region, UK, Portugal, Slovenia, and Turkey in the European region, Thailand, Philippines, Tonga in Southeast Asia and Western Pacific. So this is what we have at the moment. These countries have come together, they're collaborating, they are developing acceleration roadmap, and hopefully it will be basically the catalyst of a much stronger action plan. The acceleration plan indicate we should have advocacy and really aim at creating a social movement on the control of obesity, and it asks for engagement with partners. That's why, based on this, we established a coalition with the World Obesity Federation and UNICEF. Again, we would like to be the catalyst of a much broader set of actors that are coming together to support country implementation. And then the final point is accountability. So we need to map the implementation of policies at country level. We need to indicate where action is being taken and where also action is lagging behind, and understand why the action is lagging behind. So we believe that with this accountability mechanism, we can really create a much greater investment in the whole area of the prevention and management of obesity. So as Professor Bauer was saying, this is the year of change, and we'll look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that excellent presentation. And I think we'll hear more from, we have a number of the frontrunner countries participating on the panel, and there are a couple more countries that are sort of, I think, in the process of becoming frontrunner countries, and so those we can acknowledge as well. But before we go into the panel, I actually want to introduce the World Obesity Day flagship video, which is just a 2-minute video that really speaks to our overall theme of changing the conversation and changing perspectives, and really integrates sort of people with lived experience, people working in obesity, people working to prevent obesity from all over the world. So if we could have the World Obesity Day flagship video, and then I will introduce the panelists. Thanks.
I've spent most of my adult life being on a diet, losing weight, putting it back on again, feeling like a failure. I started to understand obesity. I now understand that it's a chronic, long-term, relapsing condition, that actually there's so many factors that contribute to why I'm living with obesity that are out of my control.
I want to stop weight stigmatization, because obesity can be caused by a lot of factors, not just only individual responsibilities.
We are not blamed for our disease. Just like every other person, we also want a beautiful, happy and fulfilling life.
Y por eso es que es prioritario que tengamos profesionales de la salud que reciban un adecuado entrenamiento en el diagnóstico y el manejo del paciente que vive con obesidad.
Childhood obesity can profoundly affect children's physical health, social and emotional well-being, academic performance, and self-esteem.
It's key to highlight the importance of addressing this complex and chronic disease that currently affects over 124 million children worldwide.
Just as obesity is a societal problem, it requires a societal response which involves us all.
Excellent, thank you. And if I could have the host put my video on and others' video, the panelists' videos on, thanks. Fantastic. Hi there, everybody. So again, I'm Johanna Ralston, and I'm CEO of World Obesity Federation, and that was a very helpful video. So we're now going to have our panelists join us, and we're going to have a conversation about the acceleration plan, about obesity priorities, and about how, what are the opportunities, what are the continued challenges. So it is my great pleasure. I'm going to just first introduce each of you by name, and if you could just wave your hand when I say your name so that people know, name and title, so that people know, and then I will go through and ask some formal prepared questions, but really then I would really encourage a conversation and a dialogue. So first we have from South African Department of Health, Ms. Rebon Ntsiye, who is Director of Nutrition. Rebon, are you? Hello, hello, hello. Dr. Gotse Shisimogo, who is NCD Program Manager in the Ministry of Health in Botswana. Hello. If we could have the Honorable Dr. Sonia Brown, Minister of State in the Ministry of Health and Wellness in Barbados. I think she is one of the earliest in the day for her. From lived experience perspective, we have our brilliant patient advocate, Mrs. Alison Ibrahim, who is a consultant and patient advocate based in Kuwait. From Bahrain, we have Dr. Tansina Tatra, who is WHO representative and head of the WHO office in Bahrain. Thank you very much, Dr. He tells us to call him Dr. C. Dr. C. Tuwintin from the NCD team leader for the Pacific community based in Fiji. Hello, hello. I think it's now latest for you at around midnight, if I'm not mistaken, a little bit after. And Dr. Mojca Gabrecic, who is a senior advisor in health for Slovenia. Hello, hello. So it is my great pleasure to have this esteemed group of panelists, and I would like to start with just one question that I'd like you to each ask in turn, respond to in turn, and then we'll go to some more in-depth questions. But first, could you tell us some of the, what are your from your perspective, your national priorities around addressing obesity? And if you could just spend maybe a minute and a half on that so we can go through a quick set of responses, and then we'll go into a conversation. We will start with Rebon Ntsiye from South Africa.
Well, thank you very much. Fortunately, as a country, we have we're just at the last part of getting approval for our updated obesity strategy. We had the one that ended in 2020. So we are now in from the 1st of April, we'll be implementing the new strategy. And the priorities in those strategies are actually in 6 areas. I'll just quickly go through them. The first one is looking at improving the food environment. You will all agree that we are really living in an obesogenic environment. South Africa is not unique. So we're looking at improving the food environment in schools and in the workplaces. And the second area, we're looking at increasing opportunities for physical activity. We really like everyone, everywhere, anytime to be able to engage in physical activity. The third area looks at education and communication that is evidence-based. We are basically talking about having a national campaign in various platforms, and also having champions throughout the country who will really champion and lead the campaigns in terms of improving healthy lifestyle, healthy eating, physical activity, and all that. But most importantly, and which is something new in our strategy, is to capacitate the healthcare system in all levels to be able to prevent and manage obesity. And then the fifth area, which is it's there, we talk about it, but we found that is really something that we lack in, and is one of the shortcomings that we were revealed in our previous strategy. That is monitoring, evaluation, and research. We have plans, but we often really lack in terms of monitoring evaluation. So in the strategy, we're really thinking of how we strengthen our monitoring evaluation, and also making sure that we have research throughout to improve and make sure that our interventions are evidence-based. The last area that we have prioritized is on policy and legislation. That is basically looking at ensuring that our policies and legislation support an environment that will promote healthy eating. We're looking at commercial determinants of health, marketing, of unhealthy foods. So we're looking at restricting marketing of unhealthy foods to children, but we also want to extend what we call in South Africa the health promotion levy, that is the tax, to any other unhealthy foods. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so we are now going to go to Dr. Shisimongo from Botswana. And if I could ask you to keep it to between 90 seconds and 2 minutes. Thanks.
Good afternoon. May you please repeat the question, because I had lost the connection and I had to
Okay,
listen.
no worries. No, it's just to tell us a little bit about what are some headline national priorities on obesity for Botswana.
Okay, thank you. For Botswana, unlike South Africa, we don't have a standalone obesity strategic plan, but we do have a multi-sectoral multi-sectoral strategy for NCDs that focuses on the 4 major risk factors and the 4 diseases, including obesity. So the mission of our strategy is to reduce the burden of NCDs and their modifiable risk factors through evidence-based, cost-effective approaches and partnership. And one of the unique things in terms of our strategy, we do have different priority areas, but one of the priority areas that is actually addressing the risk factors and addressing obesity is primordial prevention and health promotion, where the goal is to reduce the risk factors through awareness, promotion of healthy lifestyles, and creation of enabling environments. And I think in one of the opportunities that we have as a country is that we do, and other than having the NCD strategy, we have recently completed the NCD investment case that we believe is going to be used as a tool for resource mobilization. Because for us we believe that to do anything, we really need to have a resources. And at the moment, we do not have any tool that we can use to advocate for more resources, as our strategy, unfortunately, it was not costed. And also we do have, I think we do have political will and leadership, because there was an intention to move the health promotion aspect of non-communicable diseases, including obesity, to the Ministry of State President. And mainly the reason there was to accelerate the country response to NCDs and strengthen NCDs prioritization and multi-sectoral coordination. So these are some of the things that as a country we are working on. And then in 2021, there was an intention to introduce the sugar sweetened beverage tax, but we did not really work on the operationalization of the tax on implementation. And as part of the priority interventions for the acceleration plan, we have decided to take head on to ensure that the SSB tax is going to be implemented. And we are working on that with different stakeholders and with the help of WHO and UNICEF as well.
Thank you very much. Great, thanks. Okay, could we hear now from the Honorable Dr. Brown about the Barbados approach? And again, if we could try to keep it to less than 2 minutes, thanks.
I promise you I'll be less than 2 minutes. Thank you for the invitation. Our national priorities, you've just met me. I am now for the first time the Minister of State with responsibility for the non-communicable diseases. This is the first time that Barbados has seen such. So I, along with my senior minister, are responsible for health, and the NCDs are particularly my priority. Our priorities on island, we're focusing on prevention, and that is a critical priority in Barbados. We have been rolling out different initiatives, which I'm sure you'll hear about as the conversation goes on. The other priority is ensuring access to healthy, affordable foods. This seems to be a problem, at least prospectively, from many of our population members, that the access to healthy foods is prohibitive. We're also focusing on education and awareness. We've been rolling out several campaigns with respect to educating the public on what is going on, what it means in terms of obesity, especially with the childhood experience. The healthcare priorities lie in the increasing and improving the range of healthcare services that we now enjoy. So basically, these are the national priorities, and I hope to develop them a little later on in the conversation.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to go to Ms. Alison Ibrahim and ask you, you're welcome to briefly mention, sort of speak on what Kuwait is doing, but I'd also be interested to hear from a lived experience perspective, how this resonates with your own experience with these, particularly with sort of some of the policies that are in the Stop Obesity Strategy and Acceleration Plan, or what you've heard here today. Not to put you on the spot, but because
no, it's okay.
All, but kind of to put you on the spot.
Well, you know, I'm better prepared than you would think, because on Saturday I attended a workshop at the Desmond Diabetes Institute that was focused on Obesity Day. So World Obesity Day. So I'm very encouraged by the information that I was able to hear. And then in Kuwait, and there's been 97 NCD specialized clinics established throughout the country, including obesity awareness, disease management, and initiatives. So that was very encouraging to hear that. Also, the discussion was about education and focusing on children. We know that that's an increased sensitive group, and that screening and assessing, we need to be more realistic about what we're looking at. And in Kuwait, it isn't so much of it being a food desert as much as it is probably an overabundance of the more unhealthy things, and a lot of access. So the education, the recognition of what healthy eating would be looking like, and of course, focused on the fact that it isn't only food and exercise, but that we need to look at the physiological aspects of, and try to screen people for it. Talking about root causes, and also to coordinate with the rest of you all over the world to try to find initiatives that are going to work, advocate for everybody with lived experience who have obesity. For myself, it was very important to find out what stage and what class I'm in, what steps I can take to move myself in a more healthy and well-being focus. Also, to be involved in my treatment and care, a patient-centered approach. I want patients to collaborate with their healthcare team and professionals, and to be involved and knowledgeable. Self-care, resources, strategies, and follow-up. But I know that I'm preaching to the choir and that you all know this. So thank you very much for this time. Can't hear you. Missed it.
Can you hear me now? Okay. I just had a little bit of a blip. I would love to hear now from Dr. Atatra about the Bahrain perspective and priorities, and particularly through the lens of a WHO country director.
Thank you very much. In Bahrain, the WHO has been supporting the development of an acceleration plan to stop obesity. To start with, the prevalence is more than 29%. And we are aiming at, with these acceleration plans, focusing on impact to decrease it by 3% at least over the upcoming 5 years. We are promoting the use of evidence-based data. Bahrain was one of the first countries in the Gulf, among Gulf countries, to have an investment case to show how investing in managing NCDs, including obesity, can have a return, not only on the number of morbidity and mortality, but also on the general economy. Moreover, we have been focusing on delivering strategic activities like policies, guidelines, as WHO supported the country in having dietary guidelines in place and supporting how to make them operational, from having an exhibition or having support to health facilities, and integrating obesity management at all levels of healthcare. Moreover, health is not only at health facilities. So WHO is working closely with the lead of Ministry of Health and under the lead of Ministry of Health, working with universities and with schools Bahrain is one of the first countries in the region to have a network of healthy universities. And with this, we are also integrating strategic activities to address obesity as a complex problem. Moreover, looking at the life cycle approach, there were a number of strategic interventions nudging healthy choices for children at school, for children at kindergarten, and moreover, looking at the life cycle approach, working with the elderly, also nudging healthy choices. Moreover, to address obesity as a complex problem, we need to understand that the solution can only be possible with all stakeholders coming to work together hand by hand.
Thank you very much. That was excellent and very succinct. Appreciated it enormously. Dr. C, could you tell us, based in the region which has the highest rates of obesity in the world,
Yes. Sure.
a little bit
Pacific is so
about what you
popular
see
in
as
that
priority.
aspect, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Joanna. I think I work for the SPC. SPC is the intergovernmental organization that works for all 22 Pacific Island countries and territories. So my intervention may be based on the regional perspective. There are quite a lot of challenges, as we all know, in the Pacific, but at the same time, all 22 Pacific Island countries, Minister for Health, they come together and set a regional priority to actually address obesity and NCD collectively. So among many other what I call the priority that we have, there are three priorities that the Minister for Health and the heads of health really set up that address obesity. First of all, is about the upstream determinants. There are two areas that the Minister for Health addressed on, which is policy and regulation action, particularly on the marketing of unhealthy foods and non-alcoholic beverages. The other area is food physical policy, particularly focused on SSB. At the same time, there are downstream action that promote physical activity and nutrition for the behavior change using some innovative approach. So these are the three priorities that the Pacific has all together. There has been an established active network that we call the Pacific Echo Network and in Childhood Obesity Network to really address these priorities collectively and also share all the resources throughout the region as well. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that and appreciate that comprehensiveness of the response. And now last, but very much not least, Mocha from Gabrecic from Slovenia, if you could talk a bit about the Slovenian priorities. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And thanks for the invitation and good afternoon to everyone. Slovenia also have a nutrition and physical activity strategy 2015-25. So we are not addressing solely obesity, but really the risk factors and trying to raise awareness and go through health promotion approaches too, as some countries have already mentioned. And here we are happy that we are sharing the our national priorities with the acceleration plan priorities for European region. That means regulation, more regulation. We are also trying the fourth attempt to get the taxation on SSB tax. Then we are working a lot together with the other EU countries on monitoring, reformulation, monitoring marketing. We are working on public procurements of foods because we think there is the taxpayers' money which we can work with. Then the second priority is breastfeeding. And the third one, physical activity, but mainly with NGOs to use the potential of NGOs. And the fourth one is obesity management. We have just revised the program for children and adolescents, and the program for adults is entering into the full operation, also adding the older adults into that program, having teams there. But whatever we are doing, we are trying really to look through the equity lens to provide that everyone can be engaged and that we take more attention to those who are more in need and who have less their own abilities to participate. But anyway, I think it's so important to address structural factors, not just individual ones. That's our approach.
Wonderful, thank you. So these were great answers, and I don't know if you've seen on the screen, audience members are submitting applause and hearts and generally appreciative of all the fantastic work that's going on. I think broadly, I'm going to ask a couple of questions and just ask for a show of hands. If not, I'm happy to call on you. But So I think we've heard different approaches to sort of addressing obesity at the national level, sometimes within an NCD plan, sometimes as a standalone strategy, sometimes all having quite a strong focus on the obesogenic environment and the risk factors, some also having more additional focuses on health systems, on health management. And all of those are part of the acceleration plan, but I should also add that they're part of the overall obesity recommendations that were also kind of adopted at the World Health Assembly last year, which really look at the whole comprehensive nature, which is what I think we all working in obesity feel has been missing. There's been a lot of little silos working, but silos will not solve this problem. This is a challenge that needs to be solved by integrated approaches. And certainly prevention is incredibly important. Treatment is incredibly important. One at the expense of the other is just absolutely not going to work. It's just not, it's not realistic. And so that integrated approach is key. So from your perspective, I think there are we hope a few new tools here, but that integrated approach, but really the acceleration plan, which has, I think, political momentum behind it and a target to 2030, which is actually a very good time frame for trying to have a real impact, because it's long enough to be realistic about where, how long it takes to see results, but short enough that it's sort of within our professional lifetimes, and we all feel accountable towards it. So within this, you having this new framework of kind of the acceleration plan and wider obesity recommendations, but also with the Obesity Atlas, we now have financial tools to make the case that the acceleration, the Atlas is not about the cost of obesity. It's about the cost of continuing to neglect obesity as a priority and allow other diseases to, most of the measurement in the Atlas is really about, premature morbidity and mortality from cardiovascular disease and diabetes and other NCDs that are associated with obesity. So with these, how do you see that? How do you see those being useful in potentially accelerating action? I also want to make one other point that there's a third kind of tool that I think Allison pointed out too, which is doing this together. I mean, she said, now we have other countries, so that it's not just we're each kind of working in our own country and not really measuring things in ways that are comparable across countries. We're not sharing, there certainly has been sharing of best practice and good ideas, but we potentially now have a greater mechanism to do that. So with those kinds of broad opportunities, acceleration plan, the new case, the economic case made through the Atlas, and this kind of working together opportunity, what do you see as working well or being something of particular use in your country in affecting the obesity challenge? Does anyone want to put their hand up and make a remark on that? Dr. Atatra, I'm going to put you on the spot here because I thought you had some really interesting points about the Bahrain situation. And surprisingly, I just learned Bahrain is also considered a small island developing state, which I had not realized. We have, but despite being sort of situated in the Gulf, what do you see as most helpful with these new tools for your work or for the work in Bahrain?
I see that any tool we are bringing, it can't be one size fits all. So what we are doing in Bahrain is tailoring it to the context of Bahrain. So when it comes focusing on any aspects of the recommendations to accelerate stopping obesity, we have been working with data and ensuring that any intervention we have is measurable. So when we are working with schools, we are focusing on how we are changing the diet that is being offered at the canteens and measuring also what does this have as an impact on children at schools. But we can't do this alone. Like we can't only nudge the healthy choices for kids at school. We can do this also by training the teachers and training the team at schools. So in this way, we are not only addressing the sustainable development goals that are relevant to obesity or health only, but also we are expanding it, looking at women empowerment, as most of the teachers are women, and also at youth, as we are also looking at working with the same principles in universities, equally in universities and schools. So we are even looking at health beyond health facilities, obesity beyond only SDG, the relevant SDGs, to looking at youth empowerment and women empowerment.
Great. So going across the SDGs, that's a wonderful strategy. Dr. Brown, you had a comment here.
Yes, I'm agreeing with the last speaker. Forgive me for not pronouncing the name, but we've put particular focus recently, especially recently within the schools. We've recently launched our national school nutrition policy. Barbados has a history, and we are proud of it, of providing meals for children within school, both primary and secondary, mainly primary schools. So what we have done is look at the menus. We've brought in dietitians. The Ministry of Education is now on board, where we basically are trying to provide with a increment-based system, trying to provide more healthy foods, more access to fruits and vegetables. And I have to say, meals at schools, it's not totally free, but it could as well and be free. It's now about $1 per day, and you really don't see that anywhere on the island in terms of meal provision. So we're looking at that. We are including the teachers and other auxiliary staff within the schools with respect to training up in terms of getting out the message out there on what is healthy and what we do not want to see in schools. The introduction of a water day, hopefully it will become a water week. The introduction of a Fruit Fridays and Water Wednesdays, I should say. So that is part of the encouragement along with the school nutrition policy. We are also looking at the vending in the environment of the school, whether it be in the school or in close proximity to the school. So it has started where we are educating vendors, local vendors as well, in terms of how to prepare foods, what are healthier options and so on. We recognize the economic burden we are spending, and this is NCDs, which you know, obesity is a risk factor, but we are spending upwards of $375 million per year on treatment, basically, of NCDs. And with the COVID pandemic, we saw an increase of the NCDs and obesity, of course, giving a bigger burden on our polyclinic. This is our free clinic system and the public hospital that we have. We had started the race fairly heavily as of January. We had the we're working on, as you know, we are one of these 6 countries as well. So we had a wonderful White Thought conference at the beginning of this year that will lead up to the ministerial meeting in June, as well as the meeting in 2025, where it was discussed on the plans for small island development states. Whereas, you know, we get the biggest burden in terms of funding and so on. We need basically injections. So we continue to collaborate with our local NGOs, PAHO, WHO, in terms of getting the message out. Prevention, treatment, public education is one of the priorities. The data, we are beginning to rework that because of the COVID pandemic, our data had been lacking for some 2 years. So we're now on the ball, but we do know that 1 in 3 children are now experiencing the obesity or overweight, which is a large percentage of our population, I dare say. So these are the things that we're working on, bearing in mind everything that you have mentioned. I am proud to say that legislation has been passed with respect to trans fats. So by 2024, we're hoping for 0 trans fats in our foods on island.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. We're approaching the end of our time, so I'm just going to ask our last three panelists whose hands are raised to say something very quickly, and we'll have one more brief remark, and then we'll hear from Dr. Simon Barkera, our president-elect. So Ribon Netsie, could you just say very quickly the South African context? Thanks.
Actually, I just wanted to talk a bit about the support that we're getting from WHO in terms of the acceleration plan, in terms of the tools that they have exposed us to. Like I've indicated, we've just finished finalizing our plan that is just in the approval process. And one actually learns that, the strategy that we have actually done only 10 to 20% of what is needed. So with the acceleration plan from WHO is actually helping us to come up with action plans, really looking at theory of change for all the activities, main activities that we have, looking at what are the risks that could come, what are the assumptions that we're working under, and most importantly, which indicators are we going to use to track process. So So those tools are actually helping us. I just wanted to indicate to us that it really came at the right time for us to really help us to push and make sure that the strategy that we've just we're about to implement is actually, we have planned very well for it and we're able to execute it. Thank you.
Thank you. We're very pleased to hear that. That's great news. See if you could help us.
Yes, just a very quick points that I would like to share. From Pacific perspective, we actually engage more and mobilize more on the CSO and also the youth. That's the really outreach that we are going to use that platform to mobilize NCD and the obesity intervention. The other point that I would like to make is that all the Pacific Island country, we have the accountability mechanism, which is called the Pacific MANA, Pacific Monitoring Alliance for NCD Action. That includes all partner agencies and all 22 Pacific Island country that really monitor the progress on the implementation of these obesity drivers, policy legislation and implementation plan, and report back to the every Minister for Health meeting and the high-level meeting so that they make them accountable for every sector to implement these kind of national priority at the regional level that really help in the Pacific country. So thank you.
Thank you. And for those who don't, CSO is, civil society organizations and that kind of that sector that also World Obesity Federation, well, Pacific Community is our member for the Pacific region, but we have members in all countries, one sort or another, and we're very much focused on trying to support the implementation of the plans. And Moicha, would you like to say something? Sorry,
yes, thank you so much. Very quick, for the European region, I have to say that I'm very happy that countries really understand that only together, not just within the countries, but together the countries can do something, because we are all together exposed to the same obesogenic environment. So we said no, but leaving no one behind. That means at least as a passive observers, every country should join. And secondly, Francesco was speaking about radical actions, that why we are trying from Slovenian side to link it with the well-being charter 2021 of the WHO, which is speaking about well-being economy. And that could be radical, because that is something what you can put against the economic growth as the only imperative which is right now ruling the globe. So we hope that this paradigm, which was just discussed last week in Copenhagen by European region countries, could also bring something, a good perspective into this obesogenic story, because we are strongly convinced in Slovenia that we still have to change obesogenic environments. We might come to the pharmaceuticals, which can help individuals, of course, living with obesity, but we should never leave the environments as they are now, and we should do all the best we can to change them, building trust and being transparent as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. And I think last and very much not least from us is Alison. And I'm sorry, Gonce, I didn't get a chance to get any further thoughts from you. Did you have any final remarks? We'll be winding up. A quick comment on all of this.
Yeah, I
no, sorry, Gonce. We'll first go to Gonce and then to you, Alison, if that's okay. Thanks. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Nope,
my bad.
Okay. I wanted to say that I think for me also platforms like these, they actually help, because sometimes what we are struggling with is somebody else's strength or another country's strength. So when we have platforms like this where we can actually exchange, it also helps in the implementation of our plans. And like somebody was saying, for Botswana, we are actually using non-governmental organizations, and the government is actually funding them to push the NCD mandate, especially in the area of health promotion and screening. So it's really health promotion funded by the government to really take this head on. And I think one of the priority areas that I didn't mention for Botswana, we have agreed on the physical activity infrastructure. And this is also spearheaded by another Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture, in addition to other private sectors. And for Botswana, for physical activity, I think we are doing quite well, because each and every month there's a marathon that is probably supported by a private entity. And also we have decided to take the implementation of the near final food-based dietary guidelines, as well as the primary care-based management of obesity, because in Botswana, we are not yet there to offer medication as well as surgery. So we are just going to use behavioral change at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, and that's a very important point. It was one of the questions in the chat. I'm sorry, we will respond separately to those. But as some of you may have seen, there was a cover of a magazine this week that kind of turned the Atlas story into one about medication, which we think it's very exciting what's available in the treatment side, but also very much not available to most of the world, and we need to have a integrated approach that's available for all countries. So Allison, did you want to say one final word?
Yeah, just really quickly I just want to kind of remind everyone to also incorporate some ideas or research about more ideal measurements, measuring abilities, their unrealistic goal setting, waist circumference variations, and that we need to kind of figure out ways to make it more inclusive and even diverse, if you understand what I mean about those differences. And finally, the last point is that we need to talk about stigma and how we incorporate that into our initiatives, and that becomes a focus just as much as everything else does while we're trying to treat the patient. This is included. Thank you.
Yes, strong round of applause for that. I think if we started to measure the impact that stigma has had on the fact that there has been an obesity target since 2010 to 2025 that has failed significantly, if not completely, we know that stigma plays a huge role in that, as well as the other points made around lack of good data, a lack of political will, lack of integration, coordination, and certainly lack of resources. So now it is my great pleasure. So just to say that your questions will be answered separately as we send out the link to this webinar. We will provide responses, and thank you for excellent questions in the chat and in the Q&A around pharmacotherapy, physical therapy, other elements. One in Spanish that I'm sorry, I didn't understand, so I couldn't address. But it's my great pleasure now to introduce our President-elect Simon Barquera, who will wrap up this and make some closing remarks. And thank you, everybody, for what's been a really interesting, dynamic session, and one that I know is the first of many. And we also look forward to having one of these in person at some point, just so that we can all really spend time on these issues. So thank you, and best of luck in all of your efforts. And I'm going to turn this over to Simon.
Thank you, Joanna, and thank you all for joining us in this webinar. It's a pleasure to address you and have an opportunity to give some final words. Today, we heard from a variety of experts and state actors, an excellent dialogue on priorities for action on obesity. The panelists discussed how to integrate different stakeholders into their efforts and identify opportunities to move towards more comprehensive approaches to obesity prevention and control. We are currently facing a global challenge in which millions of people are being affected by the obesity epidemic. There are many misconceptions about obesity that produce stigma and undermine policy efforts to address this disease. Through conversations and platforms like the World Obesity Day developed by the World Obesity Federation and the Obesity Atlas, we can invite ourselves and our peers to dispute perceptions, focus only on individual responsibility, and consider the societal and environmental factors that also contribute to obesity. We have to keep talking and exchanging perspectives in order to reach a common vision that allows us to work together towards common goals like those established by the World Health Organization. As we know, obesity affects society as a whole. We have struggled for the past few decades to prevent and manage obesity in an appropriate way. As we heard from the panelists, many real and significant barriers often stand in the way to effectively addressing obesity and all of its consequences. However, despite these important obstacles, one of the main takeaways of this session is that we should feel optimistic about the initiatives that are being set in motion to advance and integrate national and global efforts to address obesity across all areas of the acceleration plan. This involves members of civil society, multilateral organisms, governments, academia, and decision makers. Experience tells us that this type of multi-sector teamwork is the best way to achieve the necessary changes in obesity. Furthermore, we have a body of evidence that demonstrates that public policies to control and prevent obesity are effective and their implementation is relatively simple when public well-being is prioritized over commercial interests. Among these policies are taxes to sugar beverages and junk food, front-of-pack labeling, food marketing regulations, school food guidelines, modifications to the built environment, and breast milk substitute marketing restrictions. Although no significant decreases in obesity have been observed in any country until now, there are preliminary data that suggest that obesity is beginning to decrease in some of them. Without doubt, we are gaining momentum and we must continue working together to take action on obesity. If we keep this up, very soon we will be able to feel proud to have participated in and advanced these efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and that's great. And I think that wraps up today. And bravo, everybody, and lots of applause coming through. Really wonderful sessions. And please do look at the chat as well. There's some great questions and comments, and we will follow up with everybody with a mailing list. So thanks, everybody. We can end the meeting now.